Hello, and welcome to College of DuPage's annual read-in for Black History Month. My name is President Dr. Brian Caputo, and I am delighted that you are joining us today. In homage to the National African American Read-In, the nation's oldest event dedicated to diversity in literature, our library annually hosts the C.O.D. Read-In to highlight the breadth and impact of Black authors and their work. As you listen to the live stream or click through our curated on-demand playlist, you will hear a host of faculty, staff, and students presenting notable selections from a variety of African American books, essays, music, and poetry collections. We hope you enjoy this opportunity to get involved and learn more about diverse voices within the literary community.
Hello, my name is Belemo Seguera and I am the Vice President of the Page Turners. Today I'm going to be reading a program with the two poems Caged Bird by Maya Angelou and Sympathy by Paul Laurence Dunbar. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays, and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. I know what the cage bird feels, alas, when the sun is bright on the upland slopes, when the wind stirs soft through the springing grass, and the river flows like a stream of glass, when the first bird sings and the first bud opes, and the faint perfume from its chalice steals. I know what the cage bird feels. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he claims the sky his own. I know why the cage bird beats his wing, till its blood is red on the cruel bars, for he must fly back to his perch and cling, when he fain would be on the boa swing. And a pain still throbs in the old scars, and they pulse again with a keener sting. I know why he beats his wing. A cage bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. I know why the cage bird sings, oh my, when his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and he would be free. It is not a carol of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the cage bird sings. The cage bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on a distant hill, for the cage bird sings of freedom. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sue Kirby. I'm the coordinator of Study Abroad at College of DuPage. I'm going to read excerpts from Zuela, a short story written by Jamaica Kincaid, first published in the New Yorker magazine on May 9th, 1994. My mother died at the moment I was born, and so for my whole life, there was nothing standing between me and eternity. At my back was always a bleak black wind. I could not have known at the beginning of my life that this would be so. I only came to know this in the middle of my life, just at the time when I was no longer young, and realized that I had less of some of the things I used to have in abundance, and more of some of the things I had scarcely had at all. And this realization of loss and gain made me look backward and forward. At my beginning was this woman whose face I had never seen, but at my end was nothing, no one. There was nothing between me and the black room of the world. I came to feel that for my whole life I had been standing on a precipice, that my loss had made me vulnerable, that it had made me hard and helpless. On knowing this, I became overwhelmed with sadness and shame and pity for myself. When my mother died, leaving me a small child vulnerable to all of the world, my father took me and placed me in the care of the same woman he paid to wash his clothes. It is possible that he emphasized to her the difference between the two bundles. One was a child, perhaps not the only child of his in this world, but the only child he had had with the only woman he was married to for now. The other was his soiled clothes. He would have handled one more gently than the other. He would have given one more careful instructions for care than the other. He would have expected better care for one than the other, but which one I do not know. Because he was a vain man, his appearance was very important to him. That I was a burden to him then, I know. That his soiled clothes were a burden to him then, I know. That he didn't know how to take care of me by himself, and that he didn't know how to clean his clothes himself then, I know. He had lived in a very small house with my mother. He was poor, but it is not because he was good. He had simply not done enough bad things yet to get rich. The house was on a hill, and he walked down the hill, balancing in one hand his child, in the other his clothes, and he gave them, bundle and child, to this woman. She was not a relative of his or my mother's. Her name was Eunice Paul, and she had 6 children already, the last one still a baby. That was why she still had some milk to give me, but in my mouth it tasted sour and I would not drink it. She lived in a house that was far from other houses, and from it there was a broad view of the sea and the mountains. And when I was irritable and unable to console myself, she would prop me up on a pile of old clothes and place me under an old tree, and at the sight of the sea and those mountains, so unpitying, I would exhaust myself in tears. Ma Eunice was not unkind. She treated me just the way she treated her own children. But that is not to say that she was kind to her own children. In a place like this, brutality is the only real inheritance, and cruelty is sometimes the only thing given freely. Until I was 4, I did not speak. That did not cause anyone to lose a minute of happiness. There was no one who would have worried about it in any case. I knew I could speak, but I did not want to. I saw my father every fortnight when he came to get his clean clothes. I never thought of him as coming to visit me. I thought of him as coming to pick up his clean clothes. His visits were quite steady, so when one time he did not appear as he usually did, I noticed, and I said, "Where is my father?" I was then 4 years old and saw the world as a series of sketches, soft strokes in charcoal, and so when my father would come and take his clothes away, I saw only that he suddenly appeared on a small path that led from the main road to the door of the house in which I had lived, and then, after completing his mission, disappeared as he turned onto the road where it met the path. I did not know what lay beyond the path. I did not know if after he passed from my sight he remained my father or dissolved into something altogether different, and I would never see him again in the form of my father. I would have accepted it. I did not talk. I would not talk. Jamaica Kincaid, Zuela.
Hello, I'm David Swope, Manager of Student Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at College DuPage. I would first like to say thank you to Jennifer Kelly for the work that she's done in coordinating the African American Read-In. My contribution for the read-in will come from the book, 400 Souls. It is a community history of African America from 1619 to 2019. What makes this a community history is that it is influenced and with contributions, I should say, from 90 prominent African American authors. They tell great stories. They give really good insight. The book is edited by Ibram Kendi and Keisha Blaine. Within the book, there are 10 poems, and one of the poems caught my attention, and I would just like to share that with you. The name of the poem that I will read is called "And the Record Repeats." It's by Shetley Sabri. And the Record Repeats by Shetley Sabri. There's dust, a scratch, and a groove, and here we are repeating the same 2 seconds of strange fruit. It's the same sound from the 78 RPM to the vintage vinyl to which we listen in our apartments where we return. Bruised and bloodied and beaten, unrecognizable in our mother's arms, if we find the right path back to them. All our lives we've cried a rallying cry, from the river, from the water, wanting baptism, a rebirth to an earth. where it wasn't dangerous to be young and gifted, and us slinging school bags over shoulders, where we could go to church and little black girls could remain little black girls, not only in memoriam, through a liturgy, no, a litany, we learned to pray. Warriors taught us to dance through minefields, pirouette and grand chete of revelation. In the face of annihilation, bouquets blossoming between cracks and concrete. In press page and in song and on stage, we felt the weight of sun and rainbows and shade, patient tenderness and pennilessness. Felt the rhapsody reverberate our rib cages. The good Lord and Master told us we weren't meant to survive, but we've always been good at going about our lives in factories and on our knees, in houses we cleaned with tables at which we would never eat. But still, we fell in line, took to boot, tank, and sky, in Busan, and Ardennes, and Hue. Young men threw themselves over booby trap and grenade, never to return to an ostensible parade. Strangers in homeland still no man's the barbed lacets of a bee. But still there was honey. There was Arius and chiseled sightlines. As the tale of our roots writhed, so we broke step as we dreamed dreams. Deferred again and again as we congregated over hot buttered toast. Took our seats at the table, called on our mothers to grease and braid hair of babes. As we curled close together in Harlem and Trenton on nights alight with our injuries. To the disquieting phrasing of black bodies swinging, we still curl close. To loved ones in different cities, teach our children their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s. How to dépasse beret and kickball change. As we work to lift our fist, the needle, put on a new record to play. Thank you.
Hi, it's Denise Cote. I'm a librarian, and welcome to my poetry kitchen. Today I would like to read a poem for you by Sapphire. Sapphire is best known for her novel Push and its film adaptation Precious, but she also wrote gorgeous poetry. So I would like to read a poem for you that I think may resonate with some of us, and it's of particular meaning to me, and I would like to share it with you today. It's called Broken. I think everything in me has been broken. The shiny ceramic red heart lies on the floor in shards. Its light that used to flash electric now glows steady in the dark. Outside the window, I watch the souls of my mother and father wrapped in black shawls ride down the river, weird water, and strange boats. They are without hearts, liver, feet, except souls. They are all souls now. I am here in my time, lit, broken, fire burning, full of holes, vibrating at last, light, life, mine, at last, broken. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jason Florin. I'm a full-time Human Services faculty member at College of DuPage, and I'm very pleased today to be reading an excerpt from the novel White Teeth by Zadie Smith. Zadie Smith is a British author, and White Teeth was her first novel. It's one of my favorites also, and this section I'm going to be reading is called The Peculiar Second Marriage of Archie Jones. Early in the morning, late in the century, Cricklewood, Broadway. At 06:27 hours on 1 January 1975, Alfred Archibald Jones was dressed in corduroy and sat in a fume-filled Cavalier Musketeer estate, face down on the steering wheel, hoping the judgment would not be too heavy upon him. He lay forward in a prostrate cross, jaw slack, arms splayed either side like some fallen angel. Scrunched up in each fist, he held his Army service medals, left, and his marriage license, right. For he had decided to take his mistakes with him. A little green light flashed in his eye, signaling a right turn he had resolved never to make. He was resigned to it. He was prepared for it. He had flipped a coin and stood staunchly by its conclusions. This was a decided upon suicide. In fact, it was a New Year's resolution. But even as his breathing became spasmodic and his lights dimmed, Archie was aware that Cricklewood Broadway would seem a strange choice. Strange to the first person to notice his slumped figure through the windscreen. Strange to the policeman who would file the report. To the local journalist called upon to write 50 words. To the next of kin who would read them. Squeezed between an almighty concrete cinema complex at one end and a giant intersection at the other, Cricklewood was no kind of place. It was not a place a man came to die. It was a place a man came in order to go other places via the A41. But Archie Jones didn't want to die in some pleasant, distant woodland, or on a cliff fringed with delicate heather. The way Archie saw it, country people should die in the country, and city people should die in the city. Only proper. In death as he was in life and all that. It made sense that Archibald should die on this nasty urban street where he had ended up, living alone at the age of 47 in a one-bedroom flat above a deserted chip shop. He wasn't the type to make elaborate plans, suicide notes and funeral instructions. He wasn't the type for anything fancy. All he asked for was a bit of silence, a bit of shush, so he could concentrate. He wanted it to be perfectly quiet and still, like the inside of an empty confessional box, or the moment in the brain between thought and speech. He wanted to do it before the shops opened. Overhead, a gang of the local flying vermin took off from some unseen perch, swooped, and seemed to be zeroing in on Archie's car roof, only to perform, at the last moment, an impressive U-turn, moving as one with the elegance of a curveball and landing on the Hussein Ishmael, a celebrated halal butcher. Archie was too far gone to make a big noise about it, but he watched them with a warm internal smile as they deposited their load, streaking white walls purple. He watched them stretch their peering bird heads over the Hussein Ishmael gutter. He watched them watch the slow and steady draining of blood from the dead things, chickens, cows, sheep, hanging on their hooks like coats around the shop. The unlucky. These pigeons had an instinct for the unlucky, and so they passed Archie by. For, though he did not know it, and despite the Hoover tube that lay on the passenger seat, pumping from the exhaust pipe into his lungs, luck was with him that morning. The thinnest covering of luck was on him like fresh dew. Whilst he slipped in and out of consciousness, the position of the planets, the music of the spheres, the flap of a tiger moth's diaphanous wings in Central Africa, and a whole bunch of other stuff that makes shit happen, had decided it was second chance time for Archie. Somewhere, somehow, by somebody, it had been decided that he would live.
Hi, I'm Layla Al-Khatib, and I will be reading Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped, and his feet are tied. So he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and its tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
Excerpts from When Black People Are in Pain, White People Just Join Book Clubs by Trey Johnson. I am 10 and watching my grandfather's back stiffen and shrink as an officer pulls us over on the way home from the mall. I am 16, face down on the hood of a cruiser in Ewing, New Jersey. I am 22 and sitting in the back of a car at night with my palms pressed against the driver's seat headrest in an empty lot off a feeder road outside Houston as two officers shine flashlights into our eyes. I am 36 in a mainline Philadelphia neighborhood, crying in my car when an officer taps my window because someone in a nearby house has called about me. I am 42 and watching the news of George Floyd, the latest racial killing, unspool across TV and social media. And as I watch, I am 10, 16, 22, 36 all over again, all at once. I am also experiencing another time loop, though. Once again, as the latest racial travesty pierces our collective consciousness, I watch many of my white friends and acquaintances perform the same pieties they played out after Trayvon, Eric, Sandra, Corinne, Botham, Breonna. They are savvy, practiced consumers of meaningful things. This is all to say that when things get real, really murderous, really tragic, really violent or aggressive, my white, liberal, educated friends already know what to do. What they do is read and talk about their reading. What they do is listen and talk about how they listened. What they do is never enough. This isn't the time to circle up with other white people and discuss black pain in the abstract. It's time to acknowledge and examine the pain they've personally caused. Black people live and die every day under the burdens of a racism more insidious than the current virus that's also disproportionately killing us. And yet white people tend to take a slow route to meaningful activism, locked in familiar patterns, seemingly uninterested in really advancing progress. There is still a world of signs and signaling where actions like joining book clubs, often based in some meaningfully curated readings that are probably easy to name, white fragility, how to be an anti-racist, between the world and me, maybe even all about love, take precedence. But those actions are fraught. Book clubs, for instance, are comfortable gatherings of friends who are unlikely to nudge one another to the places of discomfort that these books at their best demand. Who wants to damage a relationship over something as abstract and removed as racism? Learning about new perspectives and the ideas underlying them is great. Wanting to discuss them among friends in safe spaces is understandable, but outside the window are people marching to the beat of a different drum. The right acknowledgement of Black justice, humanity, freedom, and happiness won't be found in your book clubs, protest signs, chalk talks, or organizational statements. It will be found in your earnest willingness to dismantle systems that stand in our way, be they at your job, in your social network, your neighborhood associations, your family, or your home. It's not just about amplifying our voices, it's about investing in them and in our businesses, education, political representation, power, housing, and art. It starts also with reflection on the harm you've probably caused in a Black person's life. It may have happened when you were 10, 16, 22, 36, or 42. Comforting as it may be to read and discuss the big questions about race and justice in America, making up for past wrongs means starting with the fact that you've done wrong in the past, perhaps without realizing it at the time, in the old workplace, neighborhood, classroom, softball field, maybe even the book club. The confusing, perhaps contradictory advice on what white people should do probably feels maddening. To be told to step up, no, step back, read, no, listen, protest, don't protest, check on Black friends, leave us alone, ask for help, or do the work. It probably feels contradictory at times, and yet you'll figure it out. Black people have been similarly exhausted making the case for jobs, freedom, happiness, justice, equality, and the like. It's made us dizzy, but we've managed to find the means to walk straight. On my stroll to my voting place on Election Day in early June, I rounded a corner of City Hall and saw not only 24 armed National Guard troops, but a black woman slow riding her bike in wide, dreary circles that created a miniature Ouroboros, bringing her closer and closer to the fence line of soldiers that drew me in too. As she completed her first arc, I was able to read the sign taped to the handlebars. In red, white, and blue letters, it read, "No, you do better."
I'm Professor Deborah Smith, Nursing and Allied Health Librarian at the College of DuPage. Today, I'm going to read several poems from Nikki Giovanni. She's a talented American poet and writer. She was the first recipient of the Rosa Parks Woman of Courage Award. In 2007, Ms. Giovanni published a collection of poems called Acolytes. And within that work, she spoke of the positive support, affirmation, and freedom that she found within her library and with the support of her librarian. So the poems that I'm going to read today are a library and a poem from my librarian, Mrs. Long. A library for Kelly Martin. A library is a place to be free, to be in space, to be in cave times, to be a cook, to be a crook, to be in love, to be unhappy, to be quick and smart, to be contained and cautious, to surf the rainbow, to sail the dreams, to be blue, to be jazz, to be wonderful, to be you, a place to be. Yeah, to be. A poem for my librarian, Mrs. Long. You never know what troubled little girl needs a book. At a time when there was not TV before 3 p.m., and on Sunday, none until 5 o'clock, we sat on the front porches watching the JFG sign go on and off, greeting the neighbors, discussing the political situation, congratulating the preacher on his sermon. There was always the radio, which brought us songs from WLAC in Nashville and what we would now call easy listening or smooth jazz. But when I listened late at night with my portable that I was so proud of, tucked under my pillow, I heard Nat King Cole and Matt Dennis, June Christie and Ella Fitzgerald, and sometimes Sarah Vaughan sing Black Coffee, which I now drink. It was just called music. There was a bookstore uptown on Gay Street, which I visited and inhaled that wonderful odor of new books. Even today, I read hardcover as a preference, paperback only as a last resort. And up the hill on Vine Street, the main black corridor, sat our Carnegie Library. Mrs. Long, always glad to see you. The stereoscope always ready to show you faraway places to dream about. Mrs. Long asking, what are you looking for today? When I wanted Leaves of Grass or Alfred North Whitehead, she would go to the big library uptown. And I now know, hat in hand, to ask to borrow so that I might borrow. Probably they said something humiliating, since Southern whites like to humiliate Southern blacks. But she nonetheless brought the books back, and I held them to my chest, close to my heart. And I happily skipped back to grandmother's house, where I would sit on the front porch in a gray glider and dream of a world far away. I loved the world where I was I was safe and warm, and grandmother gave me neck kissed when I was on my way to bed. But there was a world somewhere out there, and Mrs. Long opened that wardrobe. But no lions or witches scared me. I went through knowing there would be spring.
I'm reading On the Pulse of Morning by Maya Angelou. She read this poem at Bill Clinton's inauguration in 1993. And my wife and I also included it in our wedding vows in 1993 and in our wedding invitations. A rock, a river, a tree. Host to species long since departed mark the mastodon, the dinosaur who left dry tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. But today the rock cries out to us, clearly, forcefully. Come, you may stand upon my back and face your distant destiny, but seek no haven in my shadow. I will give you no hiding place down here. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long face down in ignorance. Your mouth spilling words armed for slaughter. The rock cries out to us today, you may stand upon me, but do not hide your face. Across the wall of the world, a river sings a beautiful song. It says, come rest here by my side. Each of you a bordered country, delicate and strangely made proud, yet thrusting perpetually under siege. Your armed struggles for profit have let collars of waste upon my shore, currents of debris upon my breast. Yet today I call you to my riverside, if you will study war no more. Come, clad in peace, and I will sing the songs the Creator gave to me when I and the tree and the rock were one. Before cynicism was a bloody sear across your brow, and when you yet knew, you still knew nothing. The river sang and sings on. There is a true yearning to respond to the singing river and the wise rock. So say the Asian, the Hispanic, the Jew, the African, the Native American, the Sioux, the Catholic, the Muslim, the French, the Greek, the Irish, the rabbi, the priest, the sheik, the gay, the straight, the preacher, the privileged, the homeless, the teacher. They all hear the speaking of the tree. They hear the first and last of every tree speak to humankind today. Come to me, here, beside the river. Plant yourself by the river. Each of you, descendant of some passed-on traveler, has been paid for. You who gave me my first name, you Pawnee, Apache, Seneca, you Cherokee Nation who rested with me, then forced on bloody feet, left me to the employment of other seekers, desperate for game, starving for gold. You, the Turk, the Arab, the Swede, the German, the Eskimo, the Scot, you, the Ashanti, the Yoruba, the Kru, bought, sold, stolen, arriving on a nightmare, praying for a dream. Here, root yourselves beside me. I am that tree planted by the river, which will not be moved. I, the rock, I, the river, I, the tree. I am yours. Your passages have been paid. Lift up your faces. You have a piercing need for this bright morning dawning for you. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but if faced with courage, need not be lived again. Lift up your eyes upon this day breaking for you. Give birth again to the dream. Women, children, men, take it into the palms of your hands. Mold it into the shape of your most private need. Sculpt it into the image of your most public self. Lift up your hearts. Each hour holds chances for new beginnings. Don't be wedded forever to fear, yoked eternally to brutishness. The horizon leans forward, offering you space to place new steps of change. Here on the pulse of this fine day, you may have the courage to look up and out and upon me, the rock, the river, the tree, your country. No less to Midas than the mendicant, no less to you now than the mastodon then. Here on the pulse of this new day, you may have the grace to look up and out and into your sister's eyes and into your brother's face, your country, and say simply, very simply, with hope, good morning.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Dennis Amano. I'm a mental health counselor and faculty at College of DuPage, and I'll be reading from the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. And I'll be reading an excerpt from his chapter on power. A Black woman greeted us at the front door of Grace Lutheran School. She had been waiting. She was the school's third grade teacher, and after a quick greeting, she took us down a corridor. Classrooms stood on both sides, but I fixated on the class photos outside the rooms. All those adult white faces and young Black faces looking back at us. We occasionally peeked inside nicely decorated classrooms. No sounds, no students, no teachers, just footsteps. She took us to her third grade classroom. A long throw from the entrance, we could see the materials laid out for a science project, the details of which she explained to us. Couldn't care less about raising chicks. Then she took us over to a round table and asked if we had any questions. Sitting down, my mother asked a question about the curriculum. I did not care much about that either. I started looking more intently around the classroom. A pause in the discussion caught my attention. Dad had just asked about the racial makeup of the student body. Majority Black. I took note. My mind drifted away again, this time wandering around the classroom and around the school, trying to imagine the students and teachers remembering those pictures in the hallway. A pause caught my attention again. A question popped out of me. Are you the only Black teacher? Yes, but I cut her off. Why are you the only Black teacher? Puzzled, she looked away at my parents. My parents exchanged curious looks. I kept staring at the teacher, wondering why she was looking at my parents. Ma ended the awkward silence. He has been reading biographies of Black leaders. Ma was talking about the critically acclaimed Junior Black Americans of Achievement series, promoted by Coretta Scott King. Dad had bought a stack of these biographies, towering over 100 now. Martin Luther King Jr., Frederick Douglass, Mary McLeod Bethune, Richard Allen, Ida B. Wells. Dad kept urging me to pull from the tower for every writing project. These gripping biographies were as exciting to me as new video games on my Sega Genesis. Once I started reading, I could not stop. Discovering through these books the long history of harm done to Black Americans left me seething and brought to life a kind of racial consciousness for the first time. He's very much aware of being Black. Mom made sure to add, looking at Dad. She did not look for confirmation. Dad nodded in agreement anyway, as I stared at the teacher awaiting my answer. In that classroom, on that April day in 1990, my parents discovered that I had entered racial puberty. At 7 years old, I began to feel the encroaching fog of racism overtaking my dark body. It felt big, bigger than me, bigger than my parents or anything in my world, and threatening. What a powerful construction race is. Powerful enough to consume us, and it comes for us early. But for all of that life-shaping power, race is a mirage, which doesn't lessen its force. We are what we see ourselves as. Whether what we see exists or not, we are what people see us as, whether what they see exists or not. What people see in themselves and others has meaning and manifests itself in ideas and actions and policies, even if what they are seeing is an illusion. Race is a mirage, but one that we do well to see, while never forgetting it is a mirage, never forgetting that its true power light, never forgetting that it's the powerful light of race's power that makes the mirage. So I do not pity my 7-year-old self for identifying racially as Black. I still identify as Black, not because I believe Blackness or race is a meaningful scientific category, but because our societies, our policies, our ideas, our histories, and our cultures have rendered race and made it matter. I am among those who have been degraded by racist ideas, suffered under racist policies, and who have nevertheless endured and built movements and cultures to resist, or at least persist, through this madness. I see myself culturally and historically and politically in Blackness, in being African American, an African, a member of the forced and unforced African diaspora. I see myself historically and politically as a person of color, as a member of the global South, as a close ally of Latinx, East Asian, Middle Eastern, and Native peoples, and all the world's degraded peoples, from the Roma and Jews of Europe to the Aboriginals of Australia to the white people battered for their religion, class, gender, transgender identity, ethnicity, sexuality, body size, age, and disability. The gift of seeing myself as Black instead of being colorblind is that it allows me to clearly see myself historically and politically as being an anti-racist, as a member of the interracial body striving to accept and equate and empower racial difference of all kinds. Some white people do not identify as white for the same reason they identify as not racist, to avoid reckoning with the ways that whiteness, even as a construction and mirage, has informed their notions of America and identity and offered them privilege. The primary one being the privilege of being inherently normal, standard, and legal. It is a racial crime to be yourself if you are not white in America. It is a racial crime to look like yourself or empower yourself if you are not white. I guess I became a criminal at 7 years old. It is one of the ironies of anti-racism that we must identify racially in order to identify the racial privileges and dangers of being in our bodies. Latinx and Asian and African and European and Indigenous and Middle Eastern, these are 6 races, at least in the American context, are fundamentally power identities, because race is fundamentally a power construct of blended difference that lives socially. Race creates new forms of power, the power to categorize and judge, elevate and downgrade, include and exclude. Race makers use that power to process distinct individuals, ethnicities, and nationalities into monolithic races. I'm going to end my reading by reading a post on Instagram back in June 2020 by Ibram Kendi. It was posted next to a picture of his 4-year-old daughter, and he writes, "I love, and because I love, I resist. There have been many theories on what's fueling the growing demonstrations against racism in public and in private. Let me offer another one. Love. We love. We know the lives of our loved ones, especially our Black loved ones, are endangered under the violence of racism. People ask me all the time, what fuels me? It is the same. Love. Love of this little girl. Love of all the little and big people who I want to live full lives in the fullness of their humanity, not barred by racist policies, not degraded by racist ideas, not terrorized by racist violence. Let us be anti-racist. Let us defend life. Let us defend our human rights to live and live fully because we love. Thank you.
This is Jennifer Kelly, reference librarian at the College of DuPage and coordinator of the African American Read-In at College of DuPage. On behalf of the COD Library, I'd like to thank all of our readers, all of our listeners, and all of the supporters across College of DuPage community. Thank you for supporting the African American Read-In. We hope to see you next year back in the library.